All right, let's dive in. Today we're tackling, like, the ultimate question. What is justice?
Ooh, yeah, the big one.
And, you sent in this C.S. Lewis essay, The Humanitarian Theory of Punishment.
Oh, Lewis is gonna blow some minds with this one.
Seriously, he goes after this idea that punishment is, only about fixing peoples or stopping crime, not about what they deserve. Like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, at first glance, focusing on rehab and, deterrence sounds good.
Right. Totally reasonable.
But Lewis argues that ditching the whole desert thing, like what someone deserves for their actions, actually makes things more messed up.
More cruel, even. Or...
Less just, for sure.
Okay, so break it down. What is this humanitarian theory of punishment that Lewis is taking on?
So this humanitarian view was getting popular back then. It's basically saying punishment should be purely practical.
So about outcomes.
Yeah, just stop future crime, rehab the person. The idea of punishment because they deserve it, that's like barbaric, outdated. So it's all about making society safer, fixing criminals, but not whether the punishment, fits the crime.
Bingo. And Lewis is saying this nice approach has some dark sides. He straight up says, it is only as deserved or undeserved that a sentence can be just or unjust.
Whoa.
So no desert, no foundation for justice.
Okay, help me out here. What does a justice system without desert even look like? What's Lewis worried about?
It gets into some scary stuff, like indefinite sentences.
Oh.
If the goal is just to cure someone who decides when they're cured,
Right.
People could be locked up forever at the whim of some expert who might not even be that ethical.
Yikes. It's giving Big Brother vibes.
Totally. And Lewis also brings up punishing innocent people.
Seriously.
Yeah, he says, if deterrence is the only goal, then punishing an innocent person could be seen as okay.
As long as everyone thinks they're guilty, right?
Exactly. It's messed up, but it makes sense if punishment is only about results, not guilt or innocence.
So we could end up with people locked up, not for what they did, but for what someone thinks they'll do, or to scare others.
Jailing stuff.
It really is. But then Lewis gets even weirder. He says this humanitarian thing, trying to be so merciful, could actually be more cruel.
Yeah.
Wait, hold up. Explain that. How can focusing on rehab or deterrence backfire and make things crueler?
Well, for Lewis, real mercy needs guilt and desert.
It tempers justice, not replaces it.
Right. He uses this awesome metaphor. Ready? Mercy, detached from justice, grows unmerciful. Transplanted to the marshlands of mere humanitarianism, it becomes a man-eating weed.
Whoa, okay, vivid. So trying to be kind without knowing if someone deserves it can backfire, make things unfair and even mean.
Exactly. And this isn't some ivory tower philosophy. Lewis was writing in the mid-20th century with totalitarian regimes popping up. He was worried about nice-sounding ideas getting twisted.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's not just about criminal justice, right? This idea that we can cure people of their bad beliefs could be used for all sorts of bad stuff.
Oh, absolutely. And he even uses religion as an example.
Oh, no.
Imagine religion being seen as a mental illness that needs curing.
Treatment turns into persecution.
Exactly. Scary stuff.
It makes you realize that defining justice is way more complicated than you think.
Yeah, definitely not simple.
So many ethical problems.
Tons.
But before we go full doom and gloom, let's think about what this means for us now.
Good idea. Let's bring it back to the present.
Okay, so we've been talking about, the dangers of putting pure above desert. But some folks might say, hey, isn't focusing on what people deserve just going to create, a vengeful society? What would Lewis say to that?
Oh, that's a good question. And Lewis is way ahead of you there. He's clear that justice isn't about revenge.
Right.
It's about balance, recognizing that, yep, harm happened and holding the person responsible in a way that, fits what they did.
So not an eye for an eye kind of stuff.
Exactly. It's about consequences. Actions have consequences, and those got to be just. And that's where mercy comes in.
Right.
Lewis doesn't see mercy and justice as enemies. They work together.
I love that line where he says they, meet and kiss.
It's beautiful, right?
It is.
It's like real mercy needs justice to exist. Not ignoring the bad stuff, but bringing compassion into it.
So we're not just locking people up and throwing away the key.
Nope.
We got to have rehab, chances to make things right. But that doesn't mean justice gets ignored.
100%. And get this, Lewis even says a system only about cure could be more dehumanizing.
Hold on, what? Really? Explain that one. How can focusing on fixing people be dehumanizing?
Think about it. If we're just trying to fix people, make them fit some idea of normal, we're basically treating them like objects.
Like projects.
Yeah, like projects to be worked on. It goes back to that experts know best thing.
Right. Deciding what's best for someone even if they don't agree.
Exactly. Lewis was worried that this could lead to a society where freedom and dignity are sacrificed for some idea of a perfect society.
That's some scary sci-fi stuff.
Sadly, not so sci-fi.
True. Lots of regimes in history tried to cure people of their beliefs, and it never ended well.
Yeah.
So how do we avoid that trap? How do we balance being kind and being just, helping people, but also respecting their rights? It's like walking a tightrope.
Oh, it's a tough one, for sure. No easy answers. But what Lewis does is give us a framework. He's saying, be careful of any system that says it has all the answers.
The ones promising a perfect world where everyone's the same.
Yep. And he reminds us that real justice needs to see people as, well, people, even when they screw up.
We hold them accountable, but we also give them a chance to change.
Exactly. And that change, it can only happen when we respect their freedom and understand that people are complex. We're not robots. We can do bad stuff, but we can also do amazing things.
Man, this is deep. We've only scratched the surface of Lewis's essay, though.
So much more there.
I think what makes him so good is that he doesn't give easy answers.
He makes you think.
He does.
It's not a how-to guide for justice. It's like principles to think about, questions to ask. It pushes you to dig deeper.
And that's what makes this whole deep dive worthwhile, right?
Totally. It's not about finding the answer. It's about asking the right questions. And those questions are ones we got to keep asking, not just in courts and stuff, but in our everyday lives. How do we balance compassion and consequences? How do we build a society that's both fair and kind? How do we look out for each other and respect individual rights? These are like fundamental questions about being human.
Big stuff.
Big stuff.
And no one has all the answers.
Yeah,
right.
Right.
But Lewis gives us a starting point. Justice isn't simple. It needs careful thought.
And we got to be wary of anyone promising a quick fix. Justice is messy, complicated. It needs us to look at the whole picture of what it means to be human, good and bad.
So where do we go from here? What's the takeaway for our listener today?
Biggest takeaway. Don't be scared of how complicated justice is. Talk about it, think about it, and keep asking those tough questions. Because justice isn't some finish line, it's a journey.
And we're all on it together.
There.
It's like this whole thing really depends on how we're even defining justice in the first place. We use the word all the time.
All the time.
But do we really know what it means?
Right. It's a huge philosophical question. People have been debating it forever. And what Lewis is doing here is he's going after a specific definition of justice. The one that, boils it down to just practical results.
So instead of just asking, hey, does this punishment deter crime? Or does this rehabilitate the offender? Yeah. Lewis wants us to think deeper.
Deeper, yeah. He wants us to ask, is this punishment deserved? And that question, it brings up all these other ideas, like, are we really responsible for our actions? Free will, good versus evil. It gets complicated.
Way more complicated than just, did it work?
Right.
And this isn't just about criminals in courts, right? This idea of fairness and justice, it's everywhere.
Everywhere, totally. Think about your own life, your relationships. How do you balance forgiveness with, holding someone accountable when they mess up?
Right. Or fairness at work. How do we make sure everyone's treated right?
Exactly. Or even bigger, how do we create a safety net for people who need help, but, without taking away personal responsibility? It all comes back to this idea of justice.
It's kind of overwhelming when you start thinking about it, to be honest.
It is. It is. I think the first thing is just admitting that there's no easy answer.
No magic formula?
Nope. Justice isn't a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. It takes, really thinking it through, trying to see things from other people's perspectives, Empathy, yeah. So maybe it's more about asking the right questions rather than finding the right answers.
Maybe so.
And I think the most important question, the one Lewis would probably want us to ask is, what kind of world do we want to live in?
Whoa.
Yeah, do we want a world that's all about control and efficiency? Or do we want a world that values each person, holds people responsible for their actions, but also leaves room for mercy?
Those are some big questions to think about.
Big questions, for sure. But I think that's the point of this whole deep dive.
Right. Lewis isn't just talking about punishment. He's making us think about what makes a good society.
Absolutely. And he's saying that figuring out what justice means, it's a conversation, an ongoing thing. It's not something we just solve one day and then we're done.
We got to keep talking about it, keep thinking about it.
Always.
So to wrap things up, what's the takeaway for our listener today? What should they be walking away with?
Don't be afraid to really dig into how complicated justice is. It's okay if it's messy. Talk to people, think for yourself. And the most important thing, keep asking those hard questions. Because trying to build a just world, it's a journey. It's not about reaching the destination.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. See you next time.